So, welcome to TDMG Geopolitics Explained, where we talk about our rapidly changing world and the impacts on the globe. My name's Heath.
And I'm Max.
And today we're going to be covering the Israel-Gaza peace plan.
So, Heath, why don't you do the headline rundown?
Yep, sure. So, as everyone knows, we've had a sort of peace deal established by the Trump administration and other countries between Israel and Gaza. So, as far as we know, all 20 surviving Israel hostages that were abducted or captured on October 7th were released last week. The bodies of 4 dead Israeli hostages have been handed over by Hamas. Hamas has been accused of breaking the hostage deal as well as the ceasefire, so they haven't returned 24 of the dead hostages and have engaged in a couple violent acts on the Strip, including public executions. And nearly 2,000 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel were released, but they were not allowed to celebrate or engage in any activities that were not authorized. So Donald Trump and the US put a bit of pressure on Israel over the last few weeks to try and get to a peace deal. As we all know, there was a 20-point plan established early in the month to get that done. Trump received a standing ovation that lasted for more than 2 minutes by the Israel Parliament after addressing the Knesset, so the Israel Parliament. And more than 20 world leaders turned up to that summit on ending the Gaza war. That was in Egypt. And of course, there was the Nobel Peace Prize from last week. It wasn't given to Trump, allegedly due to not following the selection criteria. Instead, it was handed to Maria Corina Machado, who actually dedicated the award to Trump as well as her country.
Before we continue, I'd like to mention our Snapshots magazine. It covers the articles and in-depth stories about our world and its ever-changing nature. You can pick it up online for $4.95 or in print for $9.95. So Heath, thanks for doing that rundown of the headlines. Let's get more in-depth now. So which countries were sort of pivotal to this peace deal?
So obviously the United States was a major player in this peace deal. So Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his administration were crucial in securing this deal. Trump, as well as the administration, has labelled Rubio as one of the best Secretary of States in US history. And there's been a lot of talks behind Trump as well for getting this peace deal done. Some saying that he's actually taking action on issues rather than just talking. And it could also result in stronger support in the polls domestically, which is really important for the US midterms, which are coming up next year. Of course, Israel is another pivotal player in this agreement, because without them, there would be none. The conflict would be continuing. So they've agreed to the terms in principle. The Netanyahu cabinet, which is comprised of more hardline Zionists, Netanyahu was able to get them on side, specifically Bezalel Smotrich. Gaza, they were able to cobble peace deal with them. Historically, communication between terrorist groups and countries can be extremely difficult, but they were able to manage that. And of course, we've got Middle Eastern countries, which are crucial mediators along with the United States. They kind of play a more bigger role in a lot of global and, I guess, domestic diplomacy over the last couple of decades. And lastly, of course, we have Western countries, specifically, Canada, the UK, and Australia, kind of the big three who at the United Nations General Assembly jointly declared their recognition of Palestine, in part as an attempt to put pressure on the US to find a solution to the war, and also from pressure back home.
So in terms of the Trump administration as well, I believe when the Trump administration landed in Israel, there was a lot of praise for Jared Kushner, who's the son-in-law of Trump. He's married to Ivanka Trump. Jared Kushner is Jewish, and he was very much involved in the negotiations, as well as one of Trump's special advisors, Steve Witkoff, or special envoys. Steve Witkoff has also been involved in the negotiations with Russia over the war in Ukraine. So Both of those two figures, Kushner and Witkoff, got heavy praise by the Israeli government as well as the crowd in a square which has been renamed Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. But yeah, do you want to just talk about the difference between a ceasefire and a peace deal?
Yeah, sure. Because it's something that people get mixed up and kind of overlook sometimes. But everyone should realise that this is not a peace deal as such. It's a ceasefire. So it's a temporary armistice and a cessation of hostilities between groups. The peace deal is a more formal conclusion to a conflict, which involves things such as reparations, terms of surrender, rebuilding efforts, and treaties. None of that's happened so far. We're going through kind of a ceasefire phase with the three-stage plan, and then after that, there would be the establishment of a joint council in Gaza, as well as a few other measures taken.
So, in terms of the geostrategic importance of this deal and the position of Israel in the Middle East, do you want to just give people sort of briefing on that?
Yep. So this region is very important for things such as trade. I mean, you've got the Suez Canal, the Middle East bridges 3 continents, and it's where much of the world's oil and natural gas is produced. So it's clearly a significant area of economic importance. And despite things calming down, you've still got things like, Somali pirates, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and of course the Houthi rebels that still pose a risk to shipping and other things. But this is certainly a big positive, I guess, for the world economy, that things are slowly simmering down in the Middle East as of now. Despite its importance, I'd like to also bring up in this episode about some other conflicts that were kind of missed out. So we've got the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which some people might know with the M23 war. There's been quite a few people killed there. Also in Ukraine, Yemen, we've had probably more deaths than what have occurred in Gaza, but often those get missed out because they're not as geostrategically important. And yeah, they're kind of also missed out on because of things like media visibility, a lack of Western interest, and that geopolitical relevance.
And I mean, with the Ukraine war, not much has actually really changed in terms of like bigger movements on the map. It's a lot of people have compared it over the last over 3 years now to World War I trench warfare. And one of the infamous things about World War I is that the actual lines on the map didn't actually change that much, despite thousands and thousands of people, millions of people losing their lives. So according to British intelligence, Russia has sustained approximately 138,000 casualties in the war so far. And I mean, there's different sources, obviously, and some have their own interest in portraying the war in certain ways.
Yes.
Russia gives a different. Does Russia even release casualty numbers?
Not to my knowledge, and if they do, they might be manipulated. I mean, both sides might manipulate the numbers to look more appealing.
I do remember Ukraine being a bit more hesitant to release casualty figures as well. Yeah. Obviously, that's a thing about morale, keeping morale up. You don't obviously want to hear about how many of your countrymen have died in a war. But sure. Look, there's a range of sources. But what about Yemen? What have the death toll been like in that conflict?
So obviously we had about 50,000 to 150,000 potential deaths between 2021 to present, although most of the deaths actually occurred more between like 2016 to 2021 at the height of the conflict over there. We've also got places like Afghanistan, West Papua and Myanmar that just often get forgotten because they're just not in that important region that is the Middle East, the crossroad of empires where a ton of resources are, and just where a lot of the world's attention is focused at.
And probably Western audiences like Americans and really any other nation, including Australia, who is involved in the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, in Afghanistan, so the invasion of Afghanistan. It's
correct.
People probably don't want to think about that country much anymore. It's probably something they don't want to dwell on. And despite the efforts of some groups, some advocacy groups, to stand up for the rights of women in Afghanistan and all of that. The reality is that Western nations are, like, they might be trying with some aid or whatever. Some countries might be, but ultimately they don't want to put boots on the ground in Afghanistan again for another 20 years.
Yeah. And part of the focus on the Middle East, specifically Israel and Gaza, it's just because it's such a media magnet as well. You know, it's Western media, ever since the conflict started in like 1947, you know, has covered it for so long because of its religious and historical significance. And of course, there's a long-standing US political and military relationship with Israel. And of course, there's always heightened tensions in the region with regimes falling and rising throughout the decades, now currently Iran. Yeah. And the last thing I'd say for why it's so significant is just aid politics and, you know, how influential lobbying organisations are in the Middle East. I mean, of course, you've got the actual established trade organisations like OPEC, but you've also got aid advocacy groups for both Israel and Palestine, which have reached global audiences, you know, multiple political parties in many countries. And they're often, they're very capable at equipping movements to rise up and to spread awareness of things. So that's probably another reason why the region has just got so much focus and why it's like seems so significant to people. But anyways, Max, would you like to talk a little bit more about if the peace deal will actually hold? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that are thinking that it's, you know, might not, it might, you know, because it's been broken before. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so, I mean, this peace deal relies on a couple of things. It relies on Israel not, you know, turning Gaza into an Israeli settlement, like some of the ones that have happened in the West Bank, but it also relies on Hamas disarming, which so far they have refused to do. And as you mentioned towards the start of this video, there was a bit of controversy over Hamas not returning 24 of the bodies of dead Israeli hostages, and yes, because of that, they didn't return it by the deadline. Israel cut the number of aid trucks entering Gaza per day. I believe that's the per day figure, from 600 to 300. Both Israel and Hamas accuse each other of violating the agreement, and try to appeal to international media and the publics of Western countries to get on their side. As you mentioned earlier, Hamas also executed a couple of dozen collaborators with Israel on Monday, and it was confirmed to Reuters that this happened by a Hamas official. So more generally, the components of the peace plan have been labelled as vague and a bit shallow. I know that Laura Tingle from the ABC, the Australian ABC, she got on the news a few hours ago and said that it was pretty shallow, the deal or the accord or the pact or whatever that was signed in Egypt with Trump, and it was more for publicity. That was her opinion. Mm-hmm. Middle Eastern states such as Saudi Arabia are still pushing for a two-state solution, and so they have an interest in it. But people like Andrew Tillett of the Australian Financial Review, they've said that it's, quote, too early to say whether Trump's plan is a flop or not, but the participants need a lot of goodwill to keep it on track. My own little piece of analysis or my own prediction is that it won't hold. On the Israeli side, there are members of the Israeli cabinet who are sort of more hardline Zionist. My thoughts are that Netanyahu has managed to get them on side somehow, or Trump has managed to pressure them to get along with this deal. But there is still potential for those elements of the cabinet to oppose the deal or oppose progress implementing the deal. But on the Hamas side, I don't see why they would disarm. They've been since their founding, they've been dedicated to the destruction of Israel and the establishment of a Palestinian state across the whole of the territories currently under control by Israel and Palestine. So it would be very at odds with their core mission to do that.
Yeah,
so it's interesting to see. Something in the internal sort of driving ideology of Hamas would have to change. But that's just my 2 cents as to what I think is going to happen. Do you want to sort of just wrap this up by talking about what this means for the world as a whole going forward?
Yeah. So a lot of people are asking if this will have more stability for the region. And as we said before, technically yes on paper, but if the peace deal doesn't hold up, then no, it's likely to going to go back to the status quo, or worse, where we see Israel going back in and pushing further and further into Gaza, which could lengthen the humanitarian crisis that's occurring there. And also it can put at risk things like trade with increased efforts potentially from Iran, the Houthi rebels and other groups that are backed by Iran. A key part of President Trump's 20-point peace plan is the creation of that temporary international stabilization forces. And it's probably going to be difficult for them to slot in and replace the current Israeli forces, just because of logistical challenges and just like you've mentioned before, well, both of us, is the vagueness of some of the details of this agreement and just how things are going to work. So both that as well as other points in the agreement, probably going to be very difficult to enforce just because of how vague they are. Another thing is if it's going to take momentum out of pro-Palestine protests. I mean, I'm from Hobart in Tasmania, and the Greens Party down here have announced that they will not slow down. They'll actually ramp up efforts until a two-state solution occurs. And I'm assuming that consensus with the Greens and other socialist groups on the mainland is very much the same. And, of course, in other countries as well. So likely not going to see those groups slow down. And, they're probably going to increase their efforts. The other thing that it kind of means for the world is that the Middle East is kind of more solidified as a place to do international deals and establish agreements. I mean, this has all been well known for a couple of years. You've had the OPEC and the oil trade in the Middle East. You've had China's Belt and Road initiatives, many projects trying to go through there. And, of course, the US now, I guess, boosting its presence in the region more than what was in the Biden administration. So the Middle East is becoming more and more important and getting more focus. So in the future, this could mean more peace deals, trade negotiations, and other events happen there. And of course, this could also mean the potential expansion of the US and Israeli dominance in the region. Russia has effectively collapsed in the region since the Assad regime fell. I mean, they've still got Iran, but they've lost, I guess, a key country that borders Israel, which is now under a new government which is seeking semi-democratic elections from my knowledge, from my sources. But obviously we still have China that's kind of lurking the region with some trade agreements, trying to de-dollarize the region. But also another thing to mention is just China's response to the peace deal, and it was actually very muted and very quiet. And part of it is because both countries, Israel and China, have had a really tense relationship over the last couple months, partly on comments on Taiwan, and as well as Israel's plan to visit Taiwan and a few other reasons. And also because China's more pro-Iran and more supportive of a two-state solution in the Palestinian side of the conflict. But overall, this peace deal, if it occurs, will be a major step forward for the Middle East. And I mean, with the last few points here, it's going to be really like the Middle East is going to be way more, I guess, present and proactive in global politics. So.
And one other thing that I had in the back of my head that I didn't know whether it was true or not, but last year the Chinese government hosted a meeting between Hamas and Fatah. Those are the two Palestinian factions, and from that conference they signed a so-called unity deal. I'm reading this off Al Jazeera. There's other sources that have reported this, but this is the first one that came up. And that's China trying to exert its soft power as a sort of new superpower, new mediator of different conflicts, in the same way that Trump's tried to mediate conflicts that have flared up or threatened to flare up around the world. So Israel probably doesn't like the fact that China has been trying to foster unity between the Palestinian factions. That's not really in Israel's geopolitical interest for there to be unity, like internal unity within Palestine. But yeah, interesting. Anyway, I'll leave you to sign it off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've covered all the points, and thank you for that closing remarks, Max. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you learned some things today and got a kind of an insight to how this conflict has progressed and how this peace deal might potentially unfold. Thank you for watching. My name's Heath, and this is Max, of course, from TDMG Geopolitics Explained, and we'll catch you around in the next video. Thank you.
See ya. I don't know why I needed to point at the camera at the end.